Ridiculous.
Ridiculous, but I bet it was for a significant amount of money.
Still ridiculous.
Yeah, but fun. I'd watch it. Look, Jake Paul wants to test himself against actual, not just world champion, but one of the greatest of all.
And it wasn't fixed, Jake Paul would not survive 45 seconds.
I don't know about that. I think it would take a few rounds.
Really?
But yeah, first of all, Jake is a lot bigger. Jake's a lot bigger.
But what way would they?
About the number, if it was about the number, we could have started up. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. It make no sense for me. It's not my what I'm looking at.
Joe Rogan couldn't believe it when news broke that Jake Paul had reportedly offered Francis Ngannou a fight after his bout with Gervonta Davis fell through. Speaking on his podcast, Rogan described the idea as absolutely wild, even risky, for someone like Jake, who's still new to the fight game. He reminded listeners that Ngannou isn't just a former UFC champion, but one of the most explosive knockout artists in combat sports. Rogan questioned whether Jake truly grasped the danger of stepping in with a powerhouse like Francis, though he did admit that if the fight ever materialized, it would be one of the biggest and most talked about events in boxing today.
Nikista calls Francis. This is Francis telling the story. Nikista calls Francis and says, hey, we need your help. We need an opponent for Jake. Tank is out. And Francis says, all right. And Francis says, well, how can I help you? Nikista says, well, we're looking at an opponent for Jake. Tank Davis is out. And Francis says, all right, but specifically, how can I help you? Nikista takes a third swing at the bat. He says, well, we need an opponent. We need a boxer. We need a partner. We need somebody to fight Jake. Tank is out. And Francis asks him again, okay, what?
And Jake Paul's exhibition fight with Gervonta Davis collapsed amid the legal issues surrounding Davis. Paul's camp quickly began searching for a new opponent. One of the most surprising names to emerge was Francis Ngannou, the former UFC heavyweight champion turned boxing sensation. Known for his raw power, massive frame, and terrifying knockout ability, Ngannou represents one of the most dangerous challenges in all of combat sports.
I think the fight is going to be completely canceled and rescheduled, and now we have potential opponent names and some people being ruled out coming into today. This is not a joke. It was said by Mike Coppinger and others that the #1 candidate to replace Tank Davis in a Jake Paul fight, probably on a different date, was going to be Francis Ngannou. What the But we have an update on that and other potential names that Jake could fight. Again, I think on a separate date, and why I think the Jake and Tank fight is completely off. No more, maybe, no more. We don't think it'll happen.
Michael Bisping didn't hold back when addressing the massive size difference in the rumored Jake Paul vs. Francis Ngannou matchup. He noted how Paul went from preparing to fight Gervonta Davis, a much smaller lightweight, to suddenly being linked with a heavyweight monster like Ngannou. According to Bisping, that kind of leap isn't just ambitious, it's almost absurd. Moving from a fighter of Davis's size to someone with Ngannou's reach, power, and raw physical presence creates a completely different level of danger. One that raises serious questions about balance, risk, and realism.
Mike Tyson, who's 58, Anderson Silva, who was way past his prime, people like Nate Diaz, who were way smaller. Gervonta Davis really did take the piss. I mean, that was just the craziest shout ever. To go from fighting Gervonta Davis, way smaller, to now fighting boxing Francis Ngannou. I mean, listen, if he does it, fair play. But I just call #1 bullshit on this brother, because I don't see this happening. No.
This is #1 bullshit.
I just don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. Nate Diaz, yeah, 100%. I mean, he beat him once already. I'm sure Nate Diaz would love to get another big payday, because obviously boxing on Netflix and going up against Jake Paul, given his success, given the name that he has, and given the magnitude of his events, Nate Diaz will get paid an absolute fortune once again. We know that it wasn't too long ago Jake Paul was talking about boxing Anthony Joshua, and that never came to fruition. There's absolutely no way he would box Anthony Joshua. If he did, if he was to do something like that, whether it be Anthony Joshua or Francis Ngannou, I'd give him his props, I'd give him his credit. And you never know, maybe he would do it just for the clout, because in many ways it would be, sorry about the airport notifications, it would be, you know, an admirable thing to do, and it would be Jake Paul taking on somebody.
Francis Ngannou revealed that the offer from Jake Paul's team to step in as a replacement for Gervonta Davis took him by surprise. He explained that the proposal came suddenly and didn't align with his current plans. Although financial terms were mentioned, Ngannou ultimately turned it down, noting that the conditions and timing didn't add up. He stressed that this decision wasn't about money. It was about whether the matchup made professional sense.
Like Jake to replace Gervonta, I'm like, who's Jake? You know, like, I was so confused, you know, like, I wasn't expecting that at all. And he said, yeah, Jake Paul, you know, he's fighting. I'm like, no, bro, come on, don't disrespect me like that. And then they even say like, they even come out after and say, and what if the number are good? He sent out some number. I'm like, it's not about the number. If it was about the number, we could have started up. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. He make no sense for me. It's not my.
Former UFC champion Daniel Cormier delivered a straightforward warning to Jake Paul about the potential risks of facing Francis Ngannou. Cormier highlighted Ngannou's immense power, combined with his experience and size advantage, suggesting that Paul might be in over his head against a striker of that caliber with an MMA background. He emphasized that this isn't just about money or showmanship. The danger of stepping into the ring with Ngannou could have serious consequences, and the risks far outweigh any potential reward.
From fighting Gervonta Davis to calling out Francis Ngannou, Jake Paul don't want those problems. I can't say it any different. Jake Paul does not want any Francis Ngannou problems. He don't. He does not want those issues. While I think it's crazy and I credit him for doing that, and I'm surprised he did that, this could be a ploy. Him poking out his chest, saying, I want Francis. He don't want those Francis Ngannou problems. I don't care what Anthony Joshua did to Francis Ngannou. Jake Paul gets in there with Francis. Francis will knock his head off this planet. You don't want those Francis problems. I watched Francis put down Tyson Fury. Sure, Anthony Joshua beat him. But even if Jake got power, I don't think he got power to be dealing with Francis.
Cormier also called into question Jake Paul's intentions, implying that the matchup might be driven more by hype than by true competitive readiness. He pointed out that Paul could be underestimating the challenge of facing a heavyweight with knockout-level power. While Ngannou's striking is already feared in MMA, that same power is even more focused in a boxing ring. Cormier cautioned that without fully appreciating the differences between MMA striking and boxing defense, Paul could be in for a very quick and difficult fight.
Right? Boxing is much different than mixed martial arts. The target audience might be the same, but the demographics different. The places where people are brought up are different. There's bigger entourages in boxing. It's just a different world in boxing. We've known that from the very beginning. We know that Gervonta Davis was not going to just play to Jake Paul's rules. I still don't know exactly why this thing is falling apart, but it is falling apart bad. It is bursting at the seams. We are almost exactly where we should have never started. This should have never gotten started, but it did. But we are almost now exactly where we need to be.
Seven multiple analysts have flagged the idea of Jake Paul facing Francis Ngannou on short notice as a high-risk proposition, both for Paul personally and for the overall fight narrative. Originally, Paul was scheduled to fight Gervonta Davis, who withdrew late, leading Paul's team to approach Ngannou as a replacement. Ngannou, however, noted that stepping in on such short notice doesn't align with his career plans. Strategically, the limited preparation time would put Paul at a significant disadvantage against a heavyweight of Ngannou's caliber, known for his extraordinary power and experience. Experts are drawing parallels to Tyson Fury's matchup with Ngannou, noting the crossover spectacle, stylistic mismatch, and hype factor. Just as Fury, despite being a seasoned heavyweight champion, found Ngannou to be an unexpectedly tough challenge, a Paul-Ngannou fight would likely follow a similar dynamic. A social media star taking on a dominant, elite athlete.
The thing about this is, okay, if they push it back to December, then that's slightly different. But this is the kind of one situation where you're kind of 10 days out, 2 weeks out from a fight, whenever they first got wind of this. problem. This is the kind of situation where it would be possible that Jake Paul and Nikita Badarian and MVP, who are very, very shrewd people, this is the one occasion where they might end up making a mistake, taking someone at short notice who they shouldn't take, because there'd be a whole raft of people putting their hand up for it, wouldn't they? Thinking, I'll take him at short notice. I'll make out that I've been sitting on a beach eating and drinking for the last 6 months. But anything just to get in there with him, and then on the night, I'm gonna knock his head off. There'll be loads of people putting their hand up for this, and you'd have to be incredibly careful about who you took at short notice, because for it to have any kind of meaning, you would need to take a decent opponent at short notice, because obviously they're up against it because it's short notice. You couldn't take some barely warm body at short notice, because that would be even worse than giving them full notice. So this is the one area, the one situation in which it would be easy for them to make a mistake, but they don't make mistakes with things like this. They just don't. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they haven't been tempted into, somebody. Yeah, Ngannou, that'd be a mistake. It'd be such a mistake. I know he got flattened by Joshua, but so what? Joshua is a two-time unified champion of the world, and Ngannou's 270 pounds of absolute granite. That would have been a terrible, terrible mistake if they'd given him the fight.
And he dropped, like, people. I know, my opinion, Tyson Fury won that fight with Ngannou, but he still put Tyson Fury.
He was close.
Chael Sonnen recently shared his thoughts on the proposed Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou fight, mixing humor with genuine analysis. From a sporting perspective, he argued, the matchup is far from balanced. Sonnen suggested the real question is how much punishment Paul could withstand, rather than a conventional contest. He pointed out that when Ngannou faced Tyson Fury, a skilled, experienced heavyweight with a size advantage, it only took one clean shot to make an impact. By that logic, the idea of Paul enduring Ngannou's power without serious risk seems highly unlikely.